The courier stood on the rain-slicked porch, his expression a perfect mask of professional indifference. He held a stiff, legal-sized envelope, a paper rectangle that felt heavier than its weight in grams. Liam Archer signed the digital scanner with a steady hand, the plastic stylus making no sound against the glass. He took the envelope. The courier nodded once, turned, and descended the stone steps, his footsteps swallowed by the rhythmic drumming of the downpour. Liam closed the heavy oak door, the click of the latch echoing in the cavernous, silent foyer. He didn't need to open it. He knew what it was. The sharp corners, the embossed return address of a prestigious downtown law firm, Vance, Covington, and Crow. It was the final punctuation mark on a decade-long sentence. He ran his thumb over the crisp edge. Last Tuesday she had filed. His gaze drifted from the envelope to the small side table next to the door. Beside a tasteful ceramic bowl meant for keys, his phone lay screen down. He didn't need to turn it over. He knew the icon was there, a small red circle with a number 1 inside it, a notification that had sat untouched for 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. A digital ghost, a time capsule of sound. He remembered the day his father had called, his voice already thin, raspy with the illness that was consuming him from the inside out. It was a short call, filled with the strained cheerfulness of a man pretending he wasn't saying goodbye. "I'm leaving you something, son," his father had said, a slight cough interrupting the words. "A voicemail. It'll come through after, well, after. Don't play it, not yet. I know you, Liam. You're a good man. You keep your promises. You try to fix what's broken. But some things aren't broken, son. They were built wrong from the start." Liam had listened, his own throat tight with unshed grief. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Just listen. Don't play this voicemail until she files. Not a day before. You'll know when the time is right. Promise me, Liam." And Liam had promised. The day of the funeral, the notification had appeared. A voicemail from his father's number, time-stamped an hour after he had passed. It had remained there ever since, a silent testament to a dying man's final, cryptic instruction. Through every condescending remark from his wife, Chloe, through every dismissive sneer from her father, Marcus, through every family dinner that felt more like a parole hearing, the voicemail had waited. Chloe thought he was weak. Her family thought he was a failure, a small-time architect with delusions of artistry who had lucked into marrying their daughter. They saw his quietness as evidence of a lack of ambition, his patience as a sign of defeat. They didn't know his silence was a fortress. They didn't know his patience was a weapon, sharpened over years of quiet observation. They thought the game was over, that they had already won. What they didn't know was that with the arrival of this single envelope, the game had just begun. It's incredible how a single piece of paper can change everything, isn't it? How a promise made to a dying man can become the key to a lock you didn't even know you were trapped behind. I bet some of you watching have felt that way, stuck in a situation, waiting for the right moment to finally make your move. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. Now, if you like stories about the underdog finally getting their day, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because you're not going to want to miss how this unfolds. The memory of the last family dinner was still so vivid, it felt like a fresh wound. It had been at her parents' house, a sprawling monument to new money that tried to imitate old-world elegance, but only achieved a sterile, museum-like coldness. The dining room was immense, the table a polished mahogany continent that seated 20, though there were only ever the 4 of them. Marcus Thorne, Chloe's father, sat at the head of the table, a bulldog of a man whose success in commercial real estate had convinced him of his own infallibility. His wife Eleanor sat opposite him, a woman so meticulously maintained she seemed less human and more a curated collection of expensive tastes. And then there was Chloe, his wife, seated to her father's right, basking in his approval like a flower turning toward the sun. Liam sat alone on his side, the vast expanse of wood grains separating him from their tight, impenetrable circle. The topic, as it so often was Liam's career. Marcus had a way of discussing it that sounded like a doctor delivering a grim diagnosis. "So Liam," Marcus began, swirling the deep red wine in his crystal glass. He didn't look at Liam, but rather at the wine, as if its depths held more interest. "Still working on those, what is it you call them? Boutique residential projects?" The term was delivered with the faintest curl of his lip, turning the phrase into an insult. "That's right, Marcus," Liam said, his voice even. He refused to let them see his irritation. "We just completed the schematic design for the old waterfront cannery conversion." Eleanor let out a delicate, tinkling laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, that sounds quaint. Is there much money in quaint these days?" "It's about preservation, Eleanor," Liam explained, knowing it was pointless. "It's about respecting the history of a place while making it functional for the future. It's challenging work." "Challenging doesn't pay the bills," Marcus grunted, finally looking up. His eyes were small and hard. "Chloe has certain expectations, Liam, a certain lifestyle. She wasn't raised to appreciate quaint. She was raised to appreciate success, tangible success, the kind you can see on a balance sheet." Liam looked at his wife, hoping for a sliver of support, a word of defense. He found none. Chloe was watching him with an expression of weary disappointment, the same look she gave a waiter who brought the wrong order. "Daddy's right, Liam," she said, her voice smooth and cutting. "My friends' husbands are closing multi-million-dollar deals. They're partners in their firms. They're building skyscrapers, not turning old fish factories into loft apartments for artists who can't pay their rent." Each word was a carefully aimed dart. She knew he was proud of the cannery project. It was an ambitious, sustainable design that had won a local architectural award, an award she had dismissed as a little certificate for a little building. "The firm I work for is small, Chloe. We focus on quality over quantity," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He was defending himself, which meant he had already lost. "That's a lovely sentiment," Marcus interjected, dabbing his lips with a linen napkin. "It's what people who aren't winning say. Let me be frank with you, son. You're a liability. My daughter married you because she had some romantic notion about a struggling artist. Well, the romance is gone, and you're still struggling. It's a bad look for the family." The humiliation was a physical thing, a heat that crept up his neck. He could feel their judgment pressing in on him, a suffocating weight. He had designed their guest house, a project he'd poured his heart into, a structure of glass and cedar that was both modern and warm. He had done it for free, as a gift. They used it for storage. They had never once said thank you. "I provide for your daughter," Liam said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You provide a fraction of what she's accustomed to," Marcus shot back. "I provide for my daughter. The down payment on your house? That was me. The car she drives? Me. The club membership? Me. You're just the man who lives in her house." The silence that followed was thick and absolute. Liam placed his fork and knife neatly on his plate, the metallic clink unnaturally loud. He looked at Chloe one last time. Her gaze was fixed on her father, her expression one of pure adoration. She nodded in agreement with every cruel word. In that moment, she wasn't his wife. She was their daughter, and he was the intruder, the disappointment they had to tolerate. He excused himself from the table, the politeness of the gesture a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. As he walked out of the room, he heard Chloe's voice, not even bothering to lower it. "See, Daddy? He can't even handle a little honest feedback. He's just too sensitive." That night, sleeping in the guest room for what felt like the 100th time, he had picked up his phone. His finger hovered over the voicemail icon. The temptation to press it, to hear his father's voice, to find out what secret he had left behind, was immense. But a promise was a promise. His father had known this day would come. He had foreseen the endgame. Not until she files. He had put the phone down and waited. Patience was the only armor he had left. The day after the papers arrived, Liam made 2 calls. The first was to a number he had kept saved in his contacts under the simple, unassuming name Admin. The woman who answered had a calm, professional voice. "Oakwood Holdings, how may I direct your call?" "This is Mr. Archer," Liam said. "Please inform the board I'll be activating my controlling interest, and I'll need a full portfolio review sent to my personal email by end of day. Also, please schedule a meeting with Ms. Alvarez from legal for tomorrow morning. My office." "Of course, Mr. Archer," immediately. There was no surprise in her voice, only efficiency. For 2 years, Oakwood Holdings had been his silent partner, a financial behemoth operating under his remote, ghost-like direction, managed by a board of trustees his father had handpicked. They were loyalists, old friends of his father who understood the mission. They had been waiting for this call. The second call was to Chloe. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice clipped and businesslike. "Liam, I assume you got the papers." "I did," he said, his tone neutral. "I think we should talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, a hint of triumphalism in her voice. "My lawyer, Mr. Vance, will handle everything. He'll be in touch with whomever you manage to find to represent you. Just be reasonable, Liam. Don't try to fight this. You can't win." "It's not about winning, Chloe. It's about being fair." She laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Fair? Life isn't fair. You should know that by now. I'm getting the house. I'm getting the car. You'll get to walk away with your quaint portfolio of designs. My father has been very generous in what he's offering as a settlement, considering you brought nothing into this marriage." "I see," Liam said. The line she drew was so clear. Everything of value was hers, by right of her family's wealth. Everything he had contributed, his time, his loyalty, his love, had a value of 0 on her balance sheet. "Just have your lawyer call Vance," she said, her patience clearly wearing thin. "This will be much cleaner if you don't make a scene." She hung up. Liam stood in the middle of the living room, a room filled with furniture she had picked out, art she had chosen. It had never felt like his home. It was a stage set for her life, and he was just a supporting actor. He walked to the large picture window that overlooked the city. He had designed this house in his mind 1,000 times, imagining how he would tear down the walls, open it up to the light, make it a space that breathed. But his suggestions had always been dismissed. "Let's leave the design to the professionals, shall we?" she'd once said, completely oblivious to the irony. Later that afternoon, he drove to his studio. It was in an old industrial part of the city, a neighborhood of brick warehouses and forgotten factories that was slowly being rediscovered by artists and designers. To Chloe and her family, it was a depressing little workshop in a bad part of town. To Liam, it was his sanctuary. The space was a single, vast room with a soaring ceiling and huge, multi-pane windows that flooded the space with natural light. It was messy, chaotic, filled with drafting tables, stacks of blueprints, and intricate architectural models. In one corner stood a row of models that were different from the others. They weren't houses or conversions. They were sleek, futuristic designs for public spaces. A self-sustaining library, a modular emergency housing unit, a kinetic park that generated its own power. These were the projects he worked on for himself in the quiet hours of the night. These were the designs that Chloe had called his little hobbies. He sat at his main workbench, the portfolio review from Oakwood Holdings glowing on his laptop screen. The numbers were staggering, a constellation of assets, patents, and investments that had grown exponentially under the board's careful stewardship. His father hadn't just been a carpenter, he had been a quiet genius. He had invented a new type of composite wood, a self-healing concrete, and a passive solar collection system that were decades ahead of their time. He had patented them all, but lived simply, never trusting the world of big business. He had sold them all in a single, brilliant move just before he knew the end was near, creating a legacy not of cash, but of potential. A weapon for his son to wield, but only when absolutely necessary. Liam closed the laptop. He looked at the models, his little hobbies. The holding company had already funded the prototypes. They were real, and they were about to change the world. Chloe thought she was divorcing a failed architect. She had no idea she was divorcing the man who was about to redefine the industry her father dominated. He picked up a small, leather-bound journal and began to write, his pen scratching against the paper. He was making a list. A few days later, Chloe appeared at the house, unannounced. She wasn't alone. Her father, Marcus, was with her, standing slightly behind her like a bodyguard, his arms crossed over his chest. His presence was a clear act of intimidation. "Liam," Chloe said, her voice devoid of any warmth. She swept past him into the foyer, her eyes already cataloging the items she intended to take. "I'm here for my mother's silver and a few other things. Daddy came to help me carry them." "Of course," Liam said, stepping aside. He remained calm, a placid lake on the surface, but beneath he was observing, recording every detail. They moved through the house with an air of ownership, as if he were already a ghost. Chloe directed her father with sharp, imperious commands. "The candelabras in the dining room, Daddy, and the porcelain collection from the mantelpiece. Be careful with that. It's Meissen." Marcus handled the items with a grudging reverence, his movements stiff and resentful. He stopped in the living room and turned to face Liam, who had been watching them from the doorway. "Your lawyer hasn't contacted Vance," Marcus said. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "I've been busy," Liam replied evenly. Marcus took a step closer, invading Liam's personal space. The scent of his expensive cologne was overpowering. "Let me give you some free advice. Don't drag this out. You sign the papers, you take the very, very generous check I'm offering, and you disappear. You try to play hardball, you try to get a bigger piece of the pie, and I will crush you. I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never get another contract in this city again. Am I clear?" The threat hung in the air, thick and ugly. Liam didn't flinch. He met the older man's gaze without blinking. "Perfectly." Chloe, who had been wrapping a porcelain figurine in tissue paper, chimed in without looking up. "Just listen to him, Liam. For once in your life, be smart. Don't be emotional. This is a business transaction now. You're being bought out of the company. It's a clean break." The company, that's what their marriage had been to her. A merger that had failed to show a profit. He watched them pack away the symbols of their life together. Wedding gifts, vacation souvenirs, items he had thought held shared meaning. To Chloe, they were merely assets to be liquidated. As they were about to leave, Marcus paused at the door, a heavy box in his arms. "One more thing. The house. The title transfer needs to be signed by Friday. Chloe is putting it on the market next week. We already have a buyer lined up." They were not just divorcing him, they were erasing him. Every trace of his existence in this house, in this life, was being systematically expunged. "I'll have my lawyer look at the paperwork," Liam said. Marcus snorted. "Don't take too long. The offer expires. And trust me, it's the best one you're ever going to get." They left, leaving behind empty spaces on the shelves and a profound silence in the house. Liam walked over to the mantelpiece where the porcelain collection had stood. He ran his hand over the dust-free surface. He wasn't angry. The cold, calculating cruelty of their actions had burned away the anger, leaving behind something much harder, much more resolute. It was clarity. He took out his small, leather-bound journal. He opened it to a fresh page, and under the heading Grievances, he wrote, "Threatened my career. Attempted to force the sale of the house. Treated me as an employee in my own home. He added it to the list he had started after the dinner party. The list was getting longer. Each entry was a stone being laid in the foundation of what was to come. He was no longer just building a defense. He was building a case. And soon, very soon, court would be in session. The day of the mediation was a study in contrasts. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a cheerful canopy over a day that promised only conflict. Liam chose his suit carefully. It wasn't his most expensive, but it was the one his father had helped him pick out for his first major project presentation years ago. It was a simple, well-tailored charcoal gray suit, a quiet statement of professionalism and respect. It was armor. He arrived at the law offices of Vance, Covington & Crowe a precise 10 minutes early. The firm occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown skyscraper, a temple of glass and steel dedicated to the art of corporate warfare. The reception area was an exercise in minimalist intimidation. White marble floors, a sprawling abstract painting that probably cost more than his car, and a receptionist who looked at him as if he were something she had found on the bottom of her shoe. His lawyer, Ms. Alvarez, was already waiting for him in the lobby. Elena Alvarez was a woman who defied expectations. She was in her late 40s, with a kind, round face and hair pulled back in a simple bun. She dressed in practical, unassuming clothes. She looked more like a librarian or a school teacher than a litigator. Chloe's team would underestimate her. Liam was counting on it. "Liam," she said, her smile warm and reassuring, "are you ready?" "As I'll ever be," he replied. "Just remember the plan," she whispered as they were led down a long, silent hallway. "Let them talk. Let them lay all their cards on the table. Don't react. Wait for the signal." The conference room was at the end of the hall, a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. Chloe, Marcus, and their lawyer, a man named Arthur Vance, were already seated. The room was instantly divided into 2 distinct territories. Their side was a fortress of expensive tailoring and palpable arrogance. Vance was the quintessential corporate shark, with slick-back silver hair, a predatory smile, and a suit so sharp it looked like it could draw blood. Chloe sat beside him, looking radiant and confident. She wore a bright red dress, a splash of defiant color in the sterile room. She was here for a victory parade, not a negotiation. Marcus sat next to her, a silent, glowering monolith of power. Liam and Miss Alvarez took their seats opposite them. The vast, polished table between them felt like a battlefield. Vance began without preamble, his voice smooth and condescending. "Mr. Archer, Miss Alvarez, thank you for coming. I'm sure we all want to resolve this matter as quickly and painlessly as possible. To that end, my clients are prepared to make a very generous offer." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Miss Alvarez picked it up, her expression unreadable. Liam didn't need to see it. He could feel the insult radiating from it. "As you know," Vance continued, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers, "Mr. Archer brought no significant financial assets into this marriage. The marital home was purchased with a down payment provided entirely by Mr. Thorne. The vehicles were gifts. The lifestyle they enjoyed was funded almost exclusively by the Thorne family's generosity. In light of this, and in the spirit of an amicable separation, my clients are offering a one-time, lump sum payment of $50,000, in exchange for which Mr. Archer will relinquish any and all claims to any marital property, including the house." He paused for dramatic effect. "We feel this is more than fair. It should be enough for Mr. Archer to get a fresh start, find a small apartment, and get back on his feet." The humiliation was baked into every word. A small apartment. Get back on his feet. They were casting him as a charity case, a pathetic stray they were benevolently shooing away from their door. Chloe smirked, a small, tight smile of satisfaction. She leaned forward and spoke directly to Liam, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Liam, it's a good offer, Take it. It's more than you would get in court. Don't make this ugly." Liam felt Ms. Alvarez's foot gently tap his under the table. The signal. Not yet. He took a slow, deliberate breath. He looked at Vance, then at Marcus, and finally at his wife. He saw no remorse, no sadness, only a cold, hard certainty that they held all the power. They were so confident in their position, so blinded by their own arrogance, that they couldn't see the precipice they were standing on. The quiet before the storm was over. The first drops of rain were beginning to fall. Ms. Alvarez placed the paper back on the table, pushing it gently toward the center. Her voice, when she spoke, was as calm and quiet as Liam's. "Mr. Vance, we thank you for your offer. We reject it in its entirety." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The smug confidence on Vance's face flickered, replaced by a flash of annoyance. Marcus straightened in his chair, his brow furrowing. Chloe's smile vanished. "I beg your pardon?" Vance said, his voice losing some of its smoothness. "The offer is insulting," Ms. Alvarez stated simply, "and it is based on a fundamentally flawed understanding of the situation." "And what, precisely, is flawed about it?" Vance retorted, his tone sharp. "Are you denying that Mr. Thorne provided the down payment? Are you suggesting Mr. Archer has some hidden source of income he failed to disclose?" The question was a baited hook, an attempt to trap them. "My client has disclosed all his income from his architectural firm, as required by law," Ms. Alvarez said. "But the value of a partner in a marriage is not measured solely by a W-2 form. My client was a supportive, faithful husband for 10 years. He contributed his skills to the maintenance and improvement of the home. He provided emotional support. His contributions are non-monetary, but they have value." Vance laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Emotional support? You want to put a price on emotional support? That's absurd. The courts will laugh you out of the room." Chloe leaned forward again, her eyes flashing with anger. "This is ridiculous, Liam. I knew you'd do this. I knew you'd try to get money out of us. After everything my family has done for you, you have no shame." Liam held up a hand, a simple gesture that somehow commanded silence. For the first time he spoke, his voice low but carrying an undeniable weight that filled the room. "This isn't about money, Chloe." He looked directly at her, and for the first time she seemed to register the change in him. The familiar, placid man she thought she knew was gone. In his place was a stranger, someone with an unnerving stillness, a deep and unshakable resolve. "Before we discuss assets," Liam continued, his voice steady, "I think it's important to establish a record of the facts, a record of the partnership you seem so eager to dissolve." He pulled the small, leather-bound journal from his briefcase and placed it on the table. He opened it, the pages filled with his neat, precise handwriting. "On April 14th of this year," he began, "we had dinner at your parents' home. During that dinner, Marcus, you referred to my career as quaint and implied it was a financial failure. Eleanor, you questioned its profitability. Chloe, you compared me unfavorably to your friends' husbands and stated I was not meeting your expectations. You then sided with your father when he called me a liability and claimed that I was just the man who lives in her house. Is that an accurate recollection?" A stunned silence fell over their side of the table. Marcus's face began to turn a deep shade of red. Chloe stared, her mouth slightly agape. "What is the meaning of this?" Vance sputtered. "This is irrelevant." "It is entirely relevant," Liam said, his gaze unwavering. "It speaks to a pattern of disrespect and emotional abuse that has defined this marriage for years. It is context." He turned a page in his journal. "On May 2nd, Chloe, you and Marcus came to our home. Marcus, you threatened to use your influence to ruin my career if I did not accept your terms. You said, and I quote, 'I will crush you.' Chloe, you referred to our marriage as a business transaction from which I was being bought out. You then proceeded to remove items from the home without discussion, treating me as if I were no longer a resident. Is this, too, an accurate recollection? The air in the room was thick with tension. The power dynamic was subtly but irrevocably shifting. They had come expecting to dictate terms to a broken man. They were now facing a meticulous accuser with a written record of their transgressions. "This is a waste of time," Marcus growled, his voice a low rumble. "Get to the point, Liam. What do you want?" "I want what is fair," Liam said. He closed the journal. "But as I said, our disagreement stems from a flawed understanding of the situation. You believe I am a man of modest means. You believe I am powerless. You are mistaken on both counts." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He placed it on the table next to the journal. "2 years ago," he said, his voice softening slightly, "my father passed away. You all remember him. A simple carpenter, you called him. A good man, but not ambitious. Not successful in the way you measure it." He looked at Chloe. "You barely acknowledged his passing, Chloe. You complained that the funeral was depressing and that you had to miss a charity luncheon to attend." A flicker of shame, or perhaps just surprise at being reminded of her callousness, crossed her face. "He knew," Liam said, a profound sadness in his voice. "He saw this all so clearly. He knew this day would come, and he prepared for it. He left me a message, a voicemail. He gave me one instruction: don't play this until she files. Last Tuesday, she filed." With a steady finger, Liam tapped the screen of his phone. He pressed the speaker icon. The room was so quiet that the small, electronic beep of the phone was startlingly loud. And then, a voice filled the room. It was not the thin, raspy voice of a dying man. It was his father's voice from years before, strong, clear, and full of love, recorded when he was still healthy. It was a voice that held the warmth of sawdust and sunshine. "Liam," the voice began, and Liam felt his own throat tighten. "If you're hearing this, it means two things. First, I'm gone, and I'm sorry for that, son. I hope it was peaceful. Second, it means she's finally done it. She's decided that you're no longer of use to her. I'm sorry for that too. I'm sorry you had to go through it, but I'm not sorry it's over. I saw the way she looked at you, the way her family treated you, like you were dirt on their shoes. But a foundation, son, a foundation is built on dirt, the most important part of any structure." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Chloe's face was pale, a mask of confusion. "I wasn't just a carpenter, Liam," his father's voice continued, a hint of pride in the words. "You know I was always tinkering, always trying to build a better way. Well, some of those tinkerings were pretty good. That composite wood I developed in the garage, the one that's lighter than pine but stronger than steel, I patented that. The self-healing concrete formula I used to patch the driveway, patented that too. The passive solar film I put on the workshop windows, patented. All of it." Vance's pen, which had been poised over his legal pad, clattered onto the table. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief. "I never trusted the big corporations, you know that," the voice went on. "But I trusted my friends. A few weeks before the end, I sold the entire patent portfolio, all of it, to a multinational materials science firm. They knew what they were buying, and they paid for it. I had the proceeds placed into an irrevocable trust. A holding company was formed to manage it. It's called Oakwood Holdings, and you, my son, are the sole beneficiary." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the recorded voice. "There's a condition, though. I made it ironclad. You couldn't touch a dime of it, couldn't even assume control of the board, as long as you were married to her. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but I saw it as a prison, son, and this was my way of giving you the key. It was a rescue plan. The moment the marriage is legally dissolved, you gain full control. The portfolio, as of the day I signed the papers, was worth $97 million. My friends on the board tell me it's performed, Rather well since then. Chloe made a small, choking sound. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the shock that drained all the color from her face. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. But that's not all, Liam, his father's voice concluded, and it was filled with a deep, paternal love. The money is just a tool. It's what you build with it that matters. You're the architect, son. You have the vision. I just provided you with some better materials. Now go build something that will last. I love you, and I'm so proud of the man you are. The voicemail ended. The silence that rushed back in was heavier, more profound than before. It was the silence of a world that had been turned completely upside down. For a long moment, no one moved. It was as if his father's voice had frozen them in time. Arthur Vance stared at the phone on the table as if it were a venomous snake. Marcus Thorne's face, which had been red with anger, was now a pasty, sickly gray. He looked old suddenly, defeated. But the most dramatic transformation was in Chloe. Her mask of arrogant superiority had shattered, leaving behind a raw, uncomprehending panic. Her eyes darted from the phone to Liam, her mind clearly struggling to process the enormity of what she had just heard. $97 million. And it had performed well. Liam let the silence stretch, allowing the full weight of the revelation to settle upon them. He had imagined this moment for 2 years. He had played it over and over in his mind, wondering if the satisfaction would be as potent as he anticipated. But what he felt wasn't triumph. It was a quiet, somber vindication, a profound sense of release. Finally, Ms. Alvarez spoke, her voice cutting cleanly through the tension. She slid a thick, bound document across the table. It landed in front of Vance with a soft, authoritative thud. "This," she said, "is our counteroffer. But first, a few more points of clarification." She looked at Liam, who gave a slight nod. "For the past 2 years," Liam said, picking up the narrative, "as the silent, non-controlling beneficiary of the trust, I was given full access to its resources for research and development. My architectural studio, the one you called a depressing little workshop, Chloe, was the headquarters for that R&D. The little hobbies I was working on, they were prototypes. A modular, self-sufficient emergency housing system, a new design for urban vertical farming, a water purification tower, all funded by Oakwood Holdings, all built using my father's proprietary technologies, all now fully patented under my name." He paused, letting that sink in. Oakwood Holdings is no longer just a trust managing patents. It is now a fully operational design and technology firm. My firm. He then turned his gaze to Marcus, and his voice became as cold and hard as steel. "And that brings me to you, Marcus. 2 years ago, your company, Thorne Development, began using a new, lightweight composite support beam in all your high-rise constructions. You praised it in your annual report. You said it cut construction costs by 20% and improved structural integrity. You bought it from a third-party supplier based in Germany, didn't you?" Marcus could only nod, his mouth hanging slightly open. "That German company," Liam said, "was a shell corporation set up to license my father's composite wood patent, a patent which Oakwood Holdings acquired the global rights to 6 months ago. Your license has expired, which means that for the last half year, every single building you have put up has been in massive, willful patent infringement. The damages Miss Alvarez has calculated would be enough to bankrupt your company 3 times over. I now own the technology that your entire empire is built on. You threaten to crush me, but it seems, Marcus, that I am the one holding the hammer." The reversal was complete. It was absolute. The man they had dismissed as a powerless failure held their entire world in the palm of his hand. Chloe finally broke. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, desperate sound. "Liam, I didn't know." She reached a hand across the table, a gesture of pleading. "We can fix this. We don't have to do this. We can stop the divorce. We can..." No, Liam said, his voice firm but not cruel. We can't. You didn't file for divorce because our marriage was broken. You filed because you thought I was worthless. The marriage ended for you the moment you decided I was a bad investment. The only thing that has changed is the number on my balance sheet, and that's not a foundation you can build a life on. Vance, finally recovering some semblance of his professional composure, opened the document Ms. Alvarez had given him. He began to read, his eyes growing wider with every page he turned. This is, he stammered. That is a list of our terms, Ms. Alvarez said calmly. They are not negotiable. First, the divorce proceeds as planned. Mr. Archer is not seeking any of your client's assets. He wants nothing from you. In fact, he will be buying out your interest in the marital home for its full market value in cash. The transfer of title will be to him. She let that sink in. The house Chloe was so eager to sell was now his. Second, she continued, Mr. Archer requires a full, public retraction and apology from Mr. Thorne and Thorne Development for the disparaging remarks made about his professional capabilities, and from Mrs. Thorne for her part in the sustained pattern of disrespect. Third, regarding the patent infringement, Mr. Archer is not interested in destroying your company, Mr. Thorne. He believes people should have the chance to correct their mistakes. Oakwood Holdings will offer Thorne Development a new, exclusive licensing agreement. The terms will be steep, but they will allow you to continue operating. It will, however, include a morality clause. Any future action deemed detrimental or threatening to Mr. Archer or his interests will result in the immediate and permanent termination of the agreement. She paused. Finally, Chloe will sign this non-disclosure agreement, promising to never speak publicly about Mr. Archer, his business, or his personal life. In return, he will not pursue any legal action for defamation. They were trapped. Every avenue of escape had been cut off. Liam wasn't acting out of vengeance. This wasn't a punishment. It was a rebalancing of the scales. It was justice delivered with surgical precision. Marcus Thorne, the bulldog, the titan of industry, slumped in his chair. He looked at Liam, and for the first time, there was no condescension in his eyes. There was only fear. He nodded slowly, a barely perceptible movement. "We agree," he rasped, his voice a hoarse whisper. Chloe was openly weeping now, her face buried in her hands. The beautiful, confident woman who had walked in for her coronation was gone. In her place was a broken, humiliated stranger who was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had thrown away. It wasn't just the money. She had thrown away the one person who had loved her for who she was, not for what she represented. And she had done it because she had listened to the cynical, materialistic values of the world she inhabited, a world that had just been proven to be a fragile house of cards. Liam looked at her, not with hatred, but with a distant, profound pity. The game was over. He had won. But he felt no joy in her defeat, only the quiet, solemn satisfaction of a promise fulfilled. The months that followed the mediation were a whirlwind of controlled, deliberate change. Liam moved with the methodical precision of an architect executing a blueprint that had existed in his mind for years. The divorce was finalized in a quiet courtroom with no fanfare. Chloe signed the papers with a trembling hand, never once making eye contact. The house officially became his. The first thing he did was hire a crew to begin renovations, not to erase her, but to finally make the space his own. Walls came down, light flooded in, and the house began to breathe. Marcus Thorne, true to his word, issued a public statement. It was printed in the city's main business journal, a carefully worded piece of corporate speak that nonetheless amounted to a full capitulation. It praised Liam Archer's visionary design principles and announced a groundbreaking new partnership between Thorne Development and the innovative new firm, oakwood design, and technology. The licensing fees were, as Ms. Alvarez had promised, steep. A significant portion of Thorn Development's profits now flowed directly to Liam's company. Marcus had kept his empire, but he was no longer its sole king. He now paid tribute to the man he had tried to destroy. Liam's public profile grew exponentially. The unveiling of the first prototype of his modular emergency housing system, durable, solar-powered, and deployable in under an hour, made national news. Governments and NGOs from around the world began calling. He was no longer a quaint architect. He was a revolutionary, a humanitarian, a visionary. His little hobbies were now solving real-world problems. He poured himself into the work, finding a deep sense of purpose that had been missing for years. He built a team of bright, passionate young architects and engineers, creating a company culture based on respect and collaboration, everything his marriage had lacked. He heard about Chloe intermittently through mutual acquaintances who spoke in hushed, gossipy tones. Stripped of the status that came with the Thorn name and her husband's impending success, she seemed lost. Her friends from the charity circuit, who had once flocked to her, now kept their distance. She was no longer a symbol of success. She was a cautionary tale. She had to sell her expensive car and move into a modest apartment downtown. For the first time in her life, she had to get a job, working as an administrator in an art gallery. One afternoon, about a year after the divorce, Liam was walking through a park near his studio, sketching ideas in his journal. He saw her sitting on a bench, alone, eating a sandwich out of a paper bag. She looked different. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple, practical ones. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. She looked normal. And for the first time, she looked peaceful. Their eyes met across the lawn. A flicker of panic crossed her face, and she started to gather her things, ready to flee. Liam gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a gesture of forgiveness, not yet, but it was one of acknowledgement. It said, "I see you. We are no longer at war." She stopped, returned the nod, and then went back to her lunch. The interaction lasted no more than 3 seconds, but it was a quiet, unspoken treaty. He had moved on, and perhaps, in her own way, she was beginning to as well. Liam realized then that his father's gift wasn't just the money or the patents. It wasn't even the power to exact justice. The true gift was the clarity it had provided. It had forced a confrontation that had liberated him not just from a toxic marriage, but from the false idea that his worth was determined by the approval of others. He had spent a decade trying to measure up to their impossible standards, blind to the fact that he was using their broken ruler. His father's voicemail had given him back his own. True strength, he now understood, wasn't about dominance or control. It was about patience. It was about integrity. It was about knowing your own value, even when no one else can see it. The arrogant and the dismissive build their houses on sand, convinced of their own permanence. But the patient, the underestimated, they spend their time quietly laying a foundation of stone. And when the rains come and the winds blow, it is the house of stone that remains standing. His father had been a builder, and he had taught his son to build too, not just with wood and steel, but with character and resolve. Liam closed his journal, a new design already taking shape in his mind. The sun was warm on his face. He was free, and he had a world to build. It's a powerful story about knowing your own worth, isn't it? So often we let other people define us, tell us what we're capable of, but true value comes from within. I hope this story resonated with you. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a moment where you had to stand up and reclaim your own narrative. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories just like this one. Until next time, remember to build your life on a foundation of your own making.